So I said, buddy, you can't be surprised they stopped showing up, 'cause you took all their hard work for granted.
It's granted. The phrase is taken for granted, not granted. It doesn't make any sense otherwise.
Yeah, but that's the joke. His name is Gemnite Granite. Weren't you paying attention at all?
I'm gonna be honest. I've been keeping an eye on the giant fireball hurtling towards us more than the joke. It's really distracting.
Oh, yeah, good one. What, you think I was hewn from the quarry yesterday? If there was a giant fireball hurtling towards us, don't you think that I, Garnet, Gemnite Master of Flames, wouldn't know?
So, now would be a good time to sound the alarm.
Now that that's over with, I want you to really listen to my joke this time. Yes, now would be a good time to sound the alarm! In a world both very far and very near to us all, a tale of grand import is unfolding. A tale where adventure lies just over the horizon, where good and evil do battle to determine the fate of the world, and where all is not what it may appear to be. Hello everyone, GoldenNova here, and today, it's time to continue the chronicles that are still being told about never-changing land. Sit back, relax, and listen as I tell you all about the living lore of the Duel Terminal. Episode 5. The cycle begins anew. In the lands east of the Mist Valley, many tribes carve out a humble existence, peacefully basking in the bounty of the land. All of them, except for one. Hailing from the burning woodlands is a race of warriors known as the Laval. Magma flows are their rivers and volcanoes are their homes, and despite the constant roiling flames, this land is also home to a thriving forest, made of trees that, while they do not bear a single fruit nor hold a single leaf, somehow resist the flames, making them excellent building material for the Lavals to work with. Many skilled laborers harvest and carve this wood into many useful tools, but it is weapons that they are most fond of. In combination with strong and abundant steel native to this land, the Lavals build blades, cannons, and any other weapons of war they could conjure up, for it is battle that defines them. Whether it was the constant burning flames that lit the fires of battle within them, or that it was simply in their nature, the Laval decided everything through battle. Long ago, the Laval didn't even exist. There were instead many smaller tribes, from the stone-born Saxum to the reptilian Firehides to the alluring Volkites. Each tribe vied for power under the eyes of the one creature they held above all others, the dragon atop the burning mountain. A creature that reveled in violence and gave its blessing to the battles below. But, as time went on, it was the Saxums that would take power, led by a mighty commander who, upon taking the title of Lord, also donned the name that would define his role, punishing those found unworthy on the field of battle. Judgment. And when he addressed his many soldiers, he united them under a new banner. These fields and lands of lava would not be for one person to hold and rule alone. This lava would be for the good of all, and thus, the Laval were born. But this unity came at a cost. Without enemies to fight, their soldiers became restless. Perhaps none more so than Lord Judgment himself. Battle was in their blood, so they would have to find enemies to war with, lest this new ruler's kingdom burn out before it had a chance to shine. And so, Lord Judgment assigned his most trusted general, holding the title of Laval the Greater, to take his soldiers and seek out worthy opponents, so that they may all tread upon the path of glory once again. Greater gladly obliged his ruler, and with his vast army, left the burning woodlands, and to his great delight, a new enemy was soon found. In another part of the world, the Geode Mesa, lived the Gemnites, warriors of the earth who, above all else, valued chivalry and peace. A mindset that was encouraged very much by their innate expertise at fusion. Each Gemnite had a special core, and those cores could be harmonized to form a new warrior made of both their strengths. This would also merge their consciousnesses, connecting each warrior on a deep, spiritual level. They came to fully understand their fellow knights, and so empathy became the driving force behind their philosophy. They would raise no hand against each other and sought to solve conflicts with words rather than actions. However, despite this, they still had a strong drive to continue their combat training. Despite fusing many times, they could never discover where the root of that desire came from. But despite not knowing, they continued on their quest, hoping that whatever this impulse was, it could be used in times of strife to defend themselves and others. And eventually, this preparation would be tested. Out of nowhere, the Laval warband attacked the geode mesa, sieging fortresses purely for the sport of it. The Gem Knights did their best to talk with the invaders, trying to understand why they were so dedicated to fighting for no good reason. But these calls for clarity fell on deaf ears. It was not for resources or power or land that the Laval fought, it was purely to sate their thirst for combat. It was like the Gem Knights had met their polar opposites. But still, despite the baseless aggression of these burning warriors, the Gem Knights stood fast to their beliefs. They would fight only to defend themselves, repelling the Lavals as best they could, and when the battle was over and the invaders sounded the retreat, the Gem Knights refused to chase them down, hoping that the Lavals had learned their lessons, though the Knights weren't without their own heavy losses. But sadly, the Laval did not relent. The next day, more forces would arrive, and when the battle was done, even more would arrive the next day. The Lavals continued to send powerful soldiers and weapons to the Gem Knight fortresses, and the Earthen Vanguard would fight back in self-defense, refusing to fight more than was absolutely necessary to ensure their own survival. And as frustrated as the Gem Knights were about this senseless combat, the Laval were even more so. In the Gem Knights, they had found a worthy foe to match their military might, but it was like fighting the literal Earth. They took no joy in battle, nor did they express rage or look for vengeance. When the Gem Knights spoke, it was always full of disappointment and compassion, hoping that the power of words would overcome the spirit of war. And this made Laval the Greater even more dedicated to breaking their spirits. It was the mission of the Lavals not only to defeat the Gem Knights, but to also make them understand the need for battle. And so, this war between fire and earth would continue on, spanning the course of decades. And no matter what, no matter how turbulent the battle or how heartfelt the pleas were, the spirits of both the pacifists and the warriors did not yield. But eventually, change would find them. On the day of a momentous battle, where the Lavals had rallied such a force that even Judgment came to join, and the Gem Knight leader Crystal had come to oversee the defenses, before the first blow could be struck, the heavens parted and divine light poured forth from the sky. Both sides gazed in awe at the spectacle, unsure if this was a trick performed by the other army, or if it was truly divine visitation. And as it turned out, it was the latter. From this light descended mechanical angels, possessed of otherworldly grace and calculated precision. The host descended on the battlefield, and in a voice that was heard by all, yet gentler than the feathers of the dove, called out to all present.
Hark, ye small creatures, for you are in the presence of the Vylon, tools of the holy constellars, masters of the heavens, and administrators of divine justice, and you shall heed our words well.
At the sound of this, both sides bowed in deepest respect. The Constellars were a mythic race, told in ancient stories the world over as the divine protectors of Terminus. And from them came the Vylons, tools by which the Ascended did their work upon the mortal realm. Their existence was just as had been described, not a movement out of place, with tones that could make the mountains bend to their will. If the Vylon were among them, something was truly wrong with the world. Grasping for understanding, the Gem Knights spoke first. Was it the endless war? Was it the bloody conflict that had raged for so long that had sullied the land? But the Vylon raised a hand to silence the Knights. Then surely it was more fighting that was called for, the Lavals cried out. This enduring pacifism was a disgrace to the nature of their very being, a perversion of the raging spirit within their souls. But to this too, the Vylon waved a hand.
The blood and turmoil of your wars concerns us not. Enforcing your freedom to make such choices is the reason we were created. And it is that freedom that is now under threat. It is a force that would enslave you to a will of empty, hollow consumption. It is as though we fought and imprisoned many ages ago, and it is their presence that has awakened us. The Steelswarm all returning.
The two armies were in shock. The Steelswarm were as legendary as the Constellars, an ancient race of demons that threatened to consume the world and everything in it. And it was the Vylons themselves that sealed them away all that time ago, to defy the Steelswarm's most potent weapon, their minds. The demons were adept at taking the emotions of mortals and twisting them to suit their own needs, and only the Vylon could resist such forces. But the two armies were equally perplexed. They told the Vylon that they had not seen nor heard of anything that would suggest the Steelswarm were among them. This confused the Vylon, as they were sure such animosity from the Laval could only come from the influence of the demons, trying to influence the world from their ethereal prison. But the Gem Knights had nothing to show for these claims, and if the Laval had been taken over by such a force, they were unaware. And as the Gem Knights, Lavals, and Vylons tried to determine where these faint traces of the Steelswarm were coming from, Terminus itself shook, and so the world was one step closer to annihilation. Just outside the eastern exit of the Mist Valley lay the Great Marshlands, a land distinct for its beauty and diverse forms of life. The Yugioh call these lands their home, living in buildings formed from the land itself, and using the technique taught to them by those who lived in the Mist Valley, reading the wind, they connected with the many fauna that lived among them, forming a peaceful cohabitation with the land. This went on for many, many years until disaster struck. On the other side of the Mist Valley, a calamity known as the Great Blizzard struck the western side of Terminus, killing almost everyone who lived there. But survivors did exist, and slowly they began to emerge from the Mist Valley itself. Of these survivors, one stood out among the rest, a woman with crimson hair and the robes of a mage, caring for 3 children. A girl with equally red hair, a boy with steel gray hair, and another with hair of aqua. The woman introduced herself as Noellia, a battle mage from the nation of Palakti, and she informed the Yugioh elders what had happened. Western Terminus had been besieged by many invaders. She spoke of creatures from beyond the stars that consumed everything they touched, and otherworldly devils that lived to destroy the unity of mortals, reveling in their fear and suspicion. In response, her nation, the Ice Barrier, decided upon unleashing creatures they had held imprisoned for many years, dragons of untold might and power, each one more devastating than the last of which truly was a force beyond their control. Trishula brought forth a cold so absolute that even those who made their home in the tundra could not withstand it. Only the high walls of the Mist Valley and the thick foliage of the Naturia forest further south were enough to keep it from enveloping the whole continent, leaving only the east of Terminus as a place the survivors could go. The Yugioh, without a second thought, extended a hand to these survivors, giving them food and shelter in an attempt to provide hope in the face of all this loss and despair. And over the years, the pain, though it would never leave, did dull. Noellia had found community and stability among the Yugioh, more so than she had ever known within the walls of the Ice Barrier, and her children thrived as well. Amelia, her own daughter, was playful and energetic, not letting the loss of her home dampen her bright spirit. Ariel, however, was as shy as could be. Noellia had found the little girl wandering the Mist Valley after the frozen apocalypse. She was also a child of the Ice Barrier, but her parents were lost with all the rest in the Great Blizzard. As her surrogate mother, Noellia was the only person Ariel would open up to, and the mage did her best to provide the love the poor orphan no longer had. But the third child, Avance, was not so loving. The boy was the son of Natalia, Noellia's closest friend, and it was her dying wish that Noellia look after Avance. And so she did, gladly, but this didn't stop the boy from being a living testament to her guilt and grief. Noellia couldn't bring herself to tell the boy how his mother had truly died, instead saying that Natalia had died defending people from a surprise attack from the wicked Fabled. But Avance could tell his adopted mother was lying, that she was hiding something. And so, despite taking to Noellia's tutelage fairly well, he held a deep, dark disdain for the woman, unable to shake the idea that she was responsible for his mother's death, an accusation that Noellia, in her heart of hearts, would never be able to deny if it was levied against her, even though Natalia would wish for Noellia to forgive herself. Many years would pass, and despite it all, Noellia would always feel a pull from beyond the Mist Valley. When asked why she would look over at the glacier that formed over the top of the canyon dividing the world, she would simply say that there must be something, or someone, still out there. and after the villagers agreed to look after her children for a time, Noellia began an expedition into the frozen land, not unlike the prior of the ice barrier in ages past. The first time she returned, Noellia seethed with an aura of anger, and when asked what had happened, the villagers were met with a sharp, blistering response, and many people chalked that up to frustration, having worked so hard only to find nothing. But her children saw, for as she returned home, Noellia produced an ancient artifact of her people, the Mirror of the Ice Barrier. The children were sworn to secrecy, and with it, Noellia began to teach her children of the old ways, the magic of her people, and a new power she had learned during her travels. From that point on, Noellia would make many trips beyond the Mist Valley, and after each trip, she would return with more and more survivors, all of them exceptional mages from the Ice Barrier who had found ways to protect themselves from Trishula's deathly cold, suspending themselves in a frozen slumber until someone could come and save them. She also crossed paths with the Dagoth, aquatic hybrids of human and fish. Noellia had thought these creatures only myth, and so they told her they had always lived in the Arctic waters around Palakti. The deep oceans had given them shelter from Trishula's blizzard, and had now been called to join Noellia's cause by their mutual benefactors. Noellia scoffed at this, but couldn't turn them away. For what she had planned, she needed all the help she could get. When returning to the villages, Noellia passed off the Dagoths as other inhabitants of the Ice Barrier, and as their population grew, Noellia advocated for a new village be built for them, and the Gustos obliged. With the new village formed, a name for this community was needed, and so Noellia gave them one from an esoteric language that would embody their focus on the power of rituals, Gishki. With a new haven to call her own, away from the eyes of the Gusto, Noellia began to refine her new arts and taught them to her followers. Over the years, the mage had modified the Mirror of the Ice Barrier, stripping it of its original purpose and using its magical energies to enable something new. While rituals were never a popular form of conjuration in the Ice Barrier, it was something Noellia had studied, hoping that these called spirits would maintain their battle strength without losing soldiers. Normally, rituals call the spirit of otherworldly beings into the mortal realm, at which point magic is used to form a body around those spirits. But the power and energy required to create and maintain this form was exhausting to the caster, and unless the contract of the ritual was very specifically worded, the summoned creature had little reason to follow the command of their summoner, needing to be placated with gifts and sacrifices to do the duty they were called upon for. But with the help of this new artifact, the Aqua Mirror, the caster could now call the spirit of this creature directly into their own body, using hypnotism to open their bodies to spirit possession. The process would morph the original body into the called spirit, and while the caster's spirit was suppressed, their mind would remain intact, governing the use of the called spirit's power. This meant the summoner had more control and used less power, making the process much more accessible. Data she had known to be true thanks to extensive training and research done on her part, as well as on the part of her children. Having told them that these were the sacred arts of their forebears, Noellia taught Avance, Amelia, and Ariel the Gishki arts, and while not all of them took to it with aptitude, it was still a valuable lesson in what could be expected when using this new form of ritual. Ariel was proficient right out of the gate, able to call and control the spirits almost like it was second hand. Amelia, on the other hand, found it difficult to make room for the spirits to enter her body, perhaps due to her boundless energetic spirit. Avance took quite some time to adapt to this magic, but knew it would be worthwhile to learn if there ever came a time where he would have to defend himself against Noellia. Time continued again, and tensions between the Gusto and the Gishki began to rise. The Gishki began to grow, and leaned more on the Gustos for aid. The Gustos did what they could to help, but eventually, there wasn't much they could give. They offered to teach the Gishki where to hunt and harvest, and suggested other locations they could move to where more of a bounty could be found. But Noellia always took this as a slight, a thinly veiled attempt to kick the Gishkis out and leave them for dead. This was never the Gusto's intention, and they tried to offer more as a sign of goodwill, but this would never smooth things over for long. Noellia would always come back, always demand more, and eventually, the Gustos had to put a stop to this. Windar, leader of the Gustos, levied accusations of greed on Noellia. The Gustos had been nothing but accommodating to the survivors of the calamity, and at every turn they gave and gave and gave, and had more than proven their desire to help. But it seems that Noellia would never be satisfied, wanting as much as she could get to establish a new dynasty to replace the one she had lost, something that the Gustos could not abide. If the Gishki could not make do in harmony, then they would have to be banished. And upon hearing this, Noellia made her choice. If there was not enough in the great marshlands to support them, then she would do everything she could to ensure the survival of her new people. War was declared, and almost as if she and the rest of her tribe were ready for this, Noellia brandished her aqua mirror, as too did her entourage and their replica mirrors, and began channeling power from beyond the veil, becoming the Evagishkis, and so, battle ensued. Despite Noellia's aggression, this shocked the Gusto. They never thought their neighboring clan would resort to such violence, but they would not be found defenseless. Living in harmony with the wild did not mean that everything could be resolved peacefully. Sometimes marauding beasts and monsters had to be dealt with, and now the same training that had gone into warding off these threats would help them to fight the Gishki as well. Taking in a deep breath, the warriors of Gusto exhaled a breath that held their essence, their psychic resonance, and this breath was taken in by their animal companions. When in sync, their powers would amplify, growing their companions to colossal height and forming the pair of rider and mount, the Die Gusto. And so, the war for the marshlands had begun. For many years, the battle took place, with neither side ceding any ground, even though losses were great on both sides. Corpses of malformed spellcasters and majestic birds littered the marshlands, but despite these deaths, Noellia couldn't be bothered. Despite her posturing, the resources to support her people were never her chief concern, if she was concerned about them at all. What mattered was that, after all this time, her forces had finally found the one part of the marshlands where her prize had been hidden, and all the pain and despair of war would be the perfect catalyst to break its seal. When Noellia and Natalia first contacted the Steelswarm, a splinter of their influence worked its way into the mage's mind. And ever since, that splinter had been working its way slowly into her deepest thoughts, spurning her to greater and more vicious action. Perhaps, without their influence, Noellia might have lived a content life out here in the marshlands. Natalia had wanted her to make a new world, and with her children growing up in a land free of strife, that might have been enough. But the pain, the loss, the grief, the sadness, the emptiness that pervaded Noellia's soul, her guilt, was a powerful well of emotions the Steelswarm could pull from. This new world would need a lot of power after all. The power to wipe away the mistakes of old, to purge these systems that had trapped them in a war for so long. Power enough to defeat all those who had threatened them. Maybe even power enough to bring Natalia back from the land of the dead. And there was only one force that could help with that. A force that owed Noellia a favor. The earthquake meant only one thing to the Vylon. The Steelswarm were breaking through. In the before times, it was the marshlands where the ancient demons had been locked away. It was a land of great spiritual power, with legends saying that it emanated from an ancient sleeping god. Checking there first would have been prudent, but all the carnage being wrought by the Laval seemed too much like the doings of evil. Either a great mistake had been made, or someone had conspired to throw off the Vylon. Conscripting the forces of Laval and the Gem Knights, who had sworn a ceasefire in the presence of these divine instruments, the Vylon flew across the continent as quickly as possible. With their combined forces, even if it was close, disaster could be averted. But it was not. As the Vylon, Laval, and Gem Knights arrived in the Great Marshlands, they were met with the odor of death. Bodies piled one on top of the other in a gruesome ritual display, Gusto and Gishki alike. And standing in the center of this display was a mage, with hair the color of burning fire, her locks whipping and twisting about like malicious tendrils, reaching out for damned salvation. The Vylon moved to incapacitate the mage, but in a split second, the seal underneath them erupted in a pillar of dark light. Pain, sadness, rage, every negative emotion you could ever feel and more, radiated out like a font of misery. And when the light died down, the hole to hell itself had been ripped wide open. The mage stood there, her eyes wide with depraved elation. It was done. The Steelswarm were free, and her new army of demons would be unleashed upon the world to do her bidding. She raised her staff, ready to give her first proclamation, when suddenly a massive clawed hand reached out from the foremost demon, wrapped itself around the mage's torso, and the next thing everyone heard was the sickening pop and snap of a failed body, bones breaking and organs rupturing. With the other hand, Steelswarm Hercules gestured to make his own proclamation.
Go forth, my children, and feed.
And thus, the Steelswarm invasion began. And that is a wrap on episode 5 of the living lore of the Duel Terminal. Thank you all so much for your patience. I know it's been a long time since I did an update to this. Trust me, no one was more anxious to get back to this than I was. I love making episodes like this. I wouldn't say that I have an episode that I dislike, but out of all of them, anytime I get to sit down and write about the existing story and add some flourishes in there to really flesh things out, it really does make my day. And thank all of you for sticking around and watching it. You all make this worthwhile. I super appreciate your patience, your love for the stories that we all share here. It means a lot that I get to do this and share it with all of you. It really is a treat. I also want to give a big thank you to all the people who helped make this video possible. First up, Basilisk, my voice guest for this episode. Voy only had like a day to give me the lines for the episode because I really wanted to get it out there. And Voy put out some really good lines, some really great gems. Please check Ada out. Also, big thank you to Thempire Iain. You might have noticed some cool twisty turns when it came to the portraits. That was all them. They sent over the plugin, they walked me through how to use it. I'm still very new to DaVinci, and I didn't really understand nodes, and I still don't think I fully comprehend it, but they walked me through it to make it look as good as it did. I really think it adds that extra little pop and polish, so thank you once again for the help on that. And of course, big thanks to Emony-Chan for the Duel Terminal cabinet animation for the intro. It was made for episode 0, the last one. I know it's not confusing at all with the number order of the episodes, but I couldn't just let it be stuck to a single episode. It looks really cool. I wanted to make it a staple part of the series, so big thanks to them also for that. If you enjoyed the episode or any of my lore-related works, it would mean the world to me if you would consider checking out my Patreon page or YouTube channel membership. Making these videos is fun and feeds my soul, but they also take a lot of work and a lot of time, and having a stable income that doesn't rely on ad revenue from the great algorithm in the sky does a lot towards giving me the freedom to work on projects like this. I mean, I have to stick to a schedule right now. Imagine what we could get up with if we had the extra time and money, just food for thought. Supporting me also comes with a wealth of other benefits like early access to videos and custom card reviews, as well as being part of these credits. So without further ado, I want to thank the people who helped make this possible, as well as this entire channel. First up, we have our Quasar Commanders, Frankie and Marluxia is a Girl, Nebula Navigators, 3rd Dynasty, Ada Basilisk, oh, hello again, Adam Zajdel, Andrew Newman, Kane Senpai, Christopher Fuss, Clockswork, Dark Dragon X830, Emony-Chan, oh, hello again, Eric, Aaron the Worldbreaker, Garland Chaos, Green Knight, Great Big Pillock, Hairbear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Howling Zangetsu, Iron Zero, Iskander 711, Carp, Mana Charge, Marion James E. Picata, Mega Combi, Millennia Asta, Muziki Clark, Nathan Vig, Natiel Lee Alexander, Orozco 09096, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Red Eyes Jackalow, RJ the Jank Monarch, Sammy Haim, Serenity Towns, Sir Knight JCB, Skybuster Leo, The Wizard Moose, URTV 667 and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders Alpha Sly, Almento 5010, A Random Pup, Ariel Kersey, Beluga Masta, Blitzwolf, Borger with a Shotgun, Chaz Ghost, Childish Lamar, Dr. Reaper RIP, Drachenwald, Eki Bullock, Eva Padilla, Hike Boyagian, Herbal D, Inblink, Jester Designs, Kale the Dragon, Kevon Public, King Scarlet Yu-Gi-Oh!, Kim, smiley face, Lemon Yu-Gi-Oh!, Lord Whoop-De-Doo, Matt Simmons, Mick Spoofy, Michael Shimabukuro, Misty, Nitromo, Shizuka Nijimura, Sophie, apparently, Stephen Williamson, Taylor Seymour, The Legendary Raven, and Zal Drekka, as well as all the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. I literally could not do this without all of your direct support. It really means a lot that you think as much as you do about these projects, that you're willing to reach into your own pocket and help give me the support that's needed to help keep this going. I cannot put it into words, so hopefully these thanks and the work that we get to put out goes some way towards reciprocating that. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to spread the good word of lore out there, and I will see all of you next time. Bye-bye.